The alarm pierced through the VIP wing of Bayside Medical Center like a scream. Margaret Chen dropped her clipboard and ran. At 52, the head nurse had spent 3 decades in these halls. She knew the difference between routine and catastrophe. The sound coming from room 412 was catastrophe. She burst through the bathroom door and her heart stopped. Grace Thornton sat on the cold tile floor, her hospital gown pulled around her like a deflated parachute. In her trembling hand, a shard of broken mirror caught the fluorescent light. The sharp edge pressed against her wrist. No blood yet. She had not cut. But her eyes told Margaret everything. This girl wanted to die. "Grace!" Margaret kept her voice steady. "Grace! Look at me!" Nothing. No reaction. No flicker of recognition. Then Margaret remembered. The car accident 3 months ago. The trauma to her inner ears. Grace Thornton, 26 years old, daughter of tech billionaire Harrison Thornton, could not hear a single word. She was trapped in silence, and she had decided that silence was worse than death. Margaret moved slowly until she could wrap her fingers around the glass and pull it away. Grace did not fight. She simply let go, as if she had already let go of everything else. 2 days passed. Grace lay in her hospital bed, wrists bandaged, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She had not eaten, had not acknowledged the nurses, had not responded to the parade of specialists her father's money had summoned. 7 sign language instructors had tried. 7 had failed. 3 psychiatrists had attempted to reach her. 3 had given up. Harrison Thornton stood outside the glass wall of his daughter's room, watching her waste away. He was 58 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than most people earned in months. He had built Thornton Dynamics from nothing into a tech empire worth billions. He had negotiated with world leaders and outmaneuvered corporate rivals, but he could not save his daughter. The hospital administrator delivered news that made his blood run cold. If Grace showed no improvement in 72 hours, they would transfer her to a psychiatric facility for her own safety. Harrison had seen those places. Sterile, cold, places where people went to be forgotten. For the first time in his life, Harrison Thornton had no idea what to do. 3 floors below, Ethan Cole finished his 10-hour shift. He was 32, with tired eyes and gentle hands. His scrubs were wrinkled, his sneakers worn at the heels. As an orderly, he spent his days transporting patients and restocking supplies. The invisible work that kept hospitals running. It was not the life he had planned. 4 years ago, Ethan had been halfway through a graduate program in deaf education. He had dreamed of teaching deaf children, of giving them what his mother had given him. Helen Cole had been deaf since age 3. She raised Ethan alone after his father walked out, working as a seamstress while teaching her son that communication was not about sound. It was about connection. By 5, Ethan could sign fluently. By 10, he understood that his mother's deafness was not a disability. It was simply a different language. Then his wife, Claire, died. A routine surgery. A pulmonary embolism. One moment she was alive, the next she was gone. And Ethan was left with a 3-year-old daughter who kept asking when mommy was coming home. Dreams do not pay bills. Dreams do not provide health insurance for a grieving child. So Ethan put his teaching aspirations in a box labeled "Someday" and took the orderly job that would keep Lily fed and safe. Tonight, he should have gone home. His daughter was waiting at Mrs. Patterson's house, probably already asleep, but something made him stop at Margaret Chen's office. Margaret had helped him get this job 4 years ago, when no one else would hire a graduate school dropout with a toddler. He owed her more than he could ever repay. Tonight, she looked like she had aged 10 years. "Ethan," she waved him in. "Do you have a minute?" She told him about Grace, about the mirror shard, about the empty eyes, about the 72-hour countdown. "I have watched many people give up," Margaret said quietly. "I know what it looks like. That girl has stopped fighting. If someone does not reach her soon, She did not finish. She did not need to. Ethan thought about his mother, about what she had told him once, when he asked what the hardest part of being deaf was. It was not the silence, she had said, her hands moving gracefully. It was feeling like I was locked in a glass room and everyone else was on the other side. What room is she in? Ethan asked. He stood outside room 412 for a long moment. This was not his job, not his responsibility. He was an orderly, not a therapist. But through the glass, he saw her, Grace Thornton, sitting in her wheelchair, facing the window. The city lights of Seattle glittered below like scattered diamonds. She was not looking at them. Her shoulders shook. She was crying. Ethan had seen many tears in his 4 years at this hospital, but this woman's grief was different. She was crying the way people cry when they have run out of strength to hold it together, when they have stopped caring whether anyone sees. He pushed open the door. Grace spun around, eyes wide with alarm. Her hands gripped the wheelchair armrests until her knuckles went white. She had seen this before. Another stranger who would move their mouth and expect her to understand. Another person who would pity her. But Ethan did not speak. He walked slowly toward her and knelt so they were at eye level. Then he raised his hands. I see you, he signed, movements slow and deliberate. You are scared. You are angry. You think no one understands. Grace's eyes widened. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by something fragile, something dangerous. Hope. My mother was deaf, Ethan continued. She taught me this language when I was a child. She taught me that losing your hearing does not mean losing your voice. For the first time in 3 months, someone was actually speaking to Grace. Not at her, to her. I know you are in pain. I know you feel alone. But you are not. If you let me, I will help you find your way back. Grace stared at him. Tears streamed down her face. Then slowly she nodded. The door burst open. What the hell is going on here? Harrison Thornton stormed into the room, face red with fury. 2 security guards flanked him. Who are you? What are you doing with my daughter? Ethan stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. My name is Ethan Cole. I work here as an orderly. I know American Sign Language. I saw your daughter was upset and wanted to help. Help? Harrison's voice dropped to cold rage. You saw an opportunity. A vulnerable young woman. What do you want? Money? No, sir. I just know what it is like to love someone who lives in silence. Harrison opened his mouth to order Ethan removed, to have him fired. Then he saw something that stopped him cold. Grace was holding onto Ethan's sleeve. Her fingers clutched the fabric like a lifeline, and she was shaking her head, signing something clumsy and desperate. Stay. Harrison Thornton had not seen his daughter communicate with anyone in 3 months. His heart cracked open. He looked at this stranger in worn scrubs and old sneakers and saw something none of his expensive specialists had produced. Hope in his daughter's eyes. 72 hours, Harrison said finally, voice rough. You have 72 hours to prove you are legitimate. If I see anything suspicious, I will destroy you. I understand. And you still want to do this? Ethan looked at Grace, at her tear-stained face, at her hand still clutching his sleeve. Your daughter deserves a chance. That night, Ethan sat in his truck outside Mrs. Patterson's house for 20 minutes before going inside. On the dashboard, a photograph was taped to the sun visor. Claire holding newborn Lily, laughing at something Ethan had said. He could not remember the joke anymore. He could not remember the sound of her laugh. Time had stolen those details. What am I doing, Claire? He whispered. I have a daughter to raise. I cannot risk my job for a stranger. But then he remembered Grace's eyes when he signed to her, the way the emptiness had cracked. The way she had grabbed his sleeve like a drowning woman reaching for shore. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. The hardest part of being deaf was feeling invisible. Ethan looked at Claire's photograph. She is not you, but she needs help, and I think you would want me to help her. He took the photograph back and went inside to carry his sleeping daughter home. The first lesson happened the next morning. Grace sat in her hospital bed, weary and exhausted, as Ethan pulled a chair close. He did not rush, did not push. He simply raised his hands and began to teach. The first sign he taught her was pain. The second was scared. The third was thank you. By the end of that first session, Grace could say 3 things in a language she had never known existed. For the first time in 3 months, she could say something. Harrison watched through the window. He did not interrupt. The second day, Grace learned 5 more signs. For the first time since the accident, she finished her dinner. The third day, something miraculous happened. Ethan was teaching simple sentences when Grace stopped him mid-lesson. Her hands trembled as she formed words slowly, carefully. I did not want to die. I just did not know how to live. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This woman, who had been ready to end her life, was reaching out, reaching up, reaching towards something she thought was gone forever. Then let me show you, he signed. Let me show you that life is still worth living. That night, Harrison called Ethan into the room. The billionaire looked smaller somehow, more human. She signed something to me tonight, Harrison said, voice cracking. 3 words. I love you, Dad. And I had to ask you to translate. My own daughter told me she loved me, and I could not understand her. Ethan waited. I want to hire you full-time. Teach my daughter, and teach me. 5 times your current salary. 2-year contract. Health insurance for your family. And I will fund your graduate degree if you want to finish it. Ethan's mind reeled. This was everything he had dreamed of. Why do you trust me? Harrison looked toward his daughter's room. Because in 3 months, you are the only person who made her want to live. A week later, Ethan ran into Margaret Chen in the hospital parking lot. Ethan, her face lit up. I heard you took the job. How is she doing? Slowly. Some days are harder than others. Margaret nodded, reading his exhaustion. You know what I remember most about that night? Not the glass in her hand. I remember thinking that girl had decided the world could not reach her anymore, that she had built a wall so high no one would ever climb it. And now? Now I hear she is learning to sign. I hear she ate dinner for the first time in months. Margaret touched his arm. You are reaching her, Ethan. Do not give up. Ethan thought about those words the whole drive home. 2 weeks later, Grace was discharged to the Thornton estate. The mansion was everything Ethan's apartment was not. A contemporary masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking Puget Sound. His old truck looked absurd in the circular driveway. But none of that mattered when he walked into the sunroom and saw Grace waiting. She was out of the wheelchair, sitting in a comfortable chair surrounded by plants. She looked healthier, stronger. But fear still lingered in her eyes. The lessons continued. Progress was slow, frustrating. Grace had good days and terrible days. During their 3rd week, she threw a book across the room. It happened after Ethan corrected the same sign for the 5th time. Her face flushed red, tears of anger filling her eyes, and she hurled the nearest object at the wall. Ethan did not flinch. He waited as her breathing came in ragged gasps, as she covered her face, as her shoulders shook. Then he walked over and knelt beside her, waiting until she looked at him. You are allowed to be angry, he signed. This is hard, harder than most people will ever understand. But throwing things will not make it easier. I hate this, Grace signed, movement sharp. I hate being damaged. I hate that my father has to learn a new language just to talk to me. You are not damaged, Ethan signed. You are different now. That is not the same thing. You do not understand. Desperation filled her eyes. I had a life. I had plans. I was supposed to take over my father's company. I was supposed to be normal. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. An older woman at a sewing machine, smiling, eyes bright with joy. This is my mother, Helen Cole, deaf from age 3, raised me alone, worked as a seamstress for 40 years. She taught me that normal is just a word people use when they are afraid of different. Grace stared at the photo. Did she ever wish she could hear? She wished the world was more accommodating, but she never wished she was someone else. She told me once that being deaf taught her to see the world more clearly than most hearing people ever would. How? Because she could not rely on sound. She learned to read people, their expressions, their body language. She said most people talk so much they forget to actually see each other. Grace was quiet. Then she signed, I do not know how to see anything clearly anymore. Then let me help you. That is why I am here. Everything changed the day Lily came to the mansion. Ethan had not planned to bring his daughter, but Mrs. Patterson had a doctor's appointment, and Harrison had mentioned wanting to meet the little girl Ethan talked about. Lily was 6 years old with curly hair that refused to be tamed and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. She had inherited her grandmother Helen's gift for seeing the world differently. She had also inherited her grandmother's language. When they walked into the sunroom, Grace was practicing signs from a book. She looked up and froze when she saw the small girl holding Ethan's hand. Lily did not hesitate. She marched up to Grace, climbed onto her lap, and signed, Hello, my name is Lily. You are very pretty. Grace's mouth fell open. You know sign language? Grandma Helen taught me before she went to heaven. Daddy says she was the smartest person he ever knew. Your grandmother sounds wonderful. She was. Lily nodded seriously. Then her face brightened. Daddy talks about you all the time. He says you are very brave. Grace looked at Ethan, eyes soft with surprise. Does he? Ethan felt his face flush. Should we start today's lesson? But Lily had other plans. She taught Grace signs Ethan had not gotten to yet. Fun signs. Signs for games and jokes and songs that did not need sound. She showed Grace her rock collection and explained why the spotted one looked exactly like Abraham Lincoln. And Grace laughed. Not a polite, hollow laugh. A real laugh. Deep and warm and so beautiful that Ethan forgot how to breathe. Harrison walked in during the tea party. The Billionaire CEO stopped in the doorway and stared. His daughter was sitting on the floor with a 6-year-old, using stuffed animals as guests, laughing at something the child had signed. He had not seen Grace laugh like that since her mother died 10 years ago. Harrison caught Ethan's eye and nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that something precious was happening, something money could never buy. From that day, Lily became part of Grace's recovery. She came to the mansion every week, bringing her infectious joy. Grace, who had never had siblings, who had grown up in boarding schools and business dinners, discovered what it felt like to be loved simply for being herself. And Ethan discovered something dangerous. He was falling in love. He tried to fight it, told himself it was inappropriate. She was a billionaire's daughter and he was nobody. The gap between their worlds was too vast. But love does not care about logic. Love does not care about bank accounts. Love only knows what the heart wants. 6 months later, Ethan sat in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen while Lily played upstairs. The retired school teacher, 68 years old with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense, set tea in front of him and crossed her arms. Ethan Cole, we need to talk. Is Lily okay? Lily is fine. This is about you and that young woman. Ethan's stomach dropped. Do not lie to me, boy. Mrs. Patterson could be formidable. I have watched you these past months. You come home from those lessons glowing. Lily talks about Miss Grace like she is planning the wedding. And when I mentioned the Thorntons invited us to dinner, you looked terrified. Ethan slumped. It is complicated. Love usually is, but running from it just makes you lonely. She is a billionaire's daughter. I am nobody. What do I have to offer? Oh, Ethan, Mrs. Patterson took his hand. You gave her back her life. You showed her she was not alone. And you think money matters more than that? Her father will never accept me. That man looks at you like you walk on water. You did something his money could not buy. You saved his daughter. Ethan shook his head. I did not save her. She saved herself. I just showed up. Exactly. Mrs. Patterson squeezed his hand. You showed up when everyone else gave up. That is everything. She paused. What would Helen say? If your mother were here, what would she tell you? The question hit Ethan hard, because he knew exactly what his mother would say. She would tell me that love does not have a price tag, that the heart does not care about bank accounts. Smart woman, your mother. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Maybe you should listen to her. The next morning, Ethan requested a private meeting with Harrison Thornton. He dressed in his nicest clothes and walked into the home office with his heart pounding. The room was enormous, walls lined with books and awards, a massive oak desk, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sound. Harrison gestured to a chair and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. You look nervous. Should I be worried? Ethan took a breath. I need to tell you something, and you have every right to fire me afterward. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Go on. I am in love with your daughter. The words hung in the air. Harrison did not react. He took a slow sip of whiskey, eyes never leaving Ethan's face. The silence stretched unbearably long. Finally, Harrison spoke. You think I did not know? Ethan blinked. Sir? Ethan, I built this empire from nothing. I read people. I have been watching you for 6 months. Harrison stood and walked to the window. You know what I saw? A man who turned down 3 raises because he said he was not here for money. A man who taught my daughter with more patience than I have ever shown. A man who loves Grace for who she is, not what she has. He turned back. My wife died of cancer when Grace was 16. Since then, I tried to fill the void with money. Houses, cars, expensive things. His voice grew heavy. None of it saved my daughter when she needed saving. You did that, with nothing but your hands and your heart. Harrison walked toward Ethan. You want to know if I approve? Ethan held his breath. You have my blessing, Ethan Cole. More than that, you have my gratitude. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Stop calling me sir. If you are going to be part of this family, call me Harrison. That afternoon, Ethan found Grace on the balcony overlooking Puget Sound. The sunset painted the water gold and amber. She stood at the railing, wind playing with her hair. Grace, she turned, smiling. Lesson is over early. No lesson. I need to tell you something. He took her hands in his and began to sign. 13 months ago, I walked into your hospital room planning to offer comfort for a few minutes. I did not plan to stay. I did not plan to become your teacher. He paused. I did not plan to fall in love with you. Grace's breath caught. But I did. I fell in love with your determination, your courage, the way you refuse to let anything defeat you. I fell in love with how you treat Lily, how you light up when you master something new, how you make me laugh even on my worst days. His hands moved through the evening air. I know I am not what anyone would choose for you. I am not rich or impressive, just a single father with a truck that barely runs. But I love you, Grace Thornton. And I needed you to know. Tears streamed down her face. Then she launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck, and kissed him with everything she had been holding back. When they pulled apart, she was crying and laughing. You beautiful idiot, she signed. Of course I love you. I have loved you since the night you knelt beside my hospital bed and made me feel human again. I thought you saw me as just your teacher. I thought you saw me as someone who needed fixing. You were never what you believed yourself to be." Ethan cupped her face. "You were just lost in a world that had forgotten how to listen." Grace kissed him again. "I love you. So much it terrifies me." "Good, because I am terrified too." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon. Two people who had found each other in silence and learned to speak without words. 6 months later, they married in the garden of the Thornton estate, a small ceremony, intimate, nothing like the elaborate affair Grace could have had. Harrison walked his daughter down the aisle, tears streaming down his face. The powerful billionaire reduced to a father who had almost lost everything and somehow gotten it all back. Lily served as flower girl, scattering petals and signing "I love you" to both Ethan and Grace as she passed. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes. Margaret Chen watched from the back, grateful that her instinct to tell Ethan about Grace had led to this moment. The ceremony was conducted entirely in American Sign Language. No spoken words, just hands moving through golden evening light. The officiant signed the vows. Ethan and Grace signed their responses. Every promise was made in the language that had brought them together. The guests watched in hushed wonder. They did not understand every word, but they understood the meaning. They were witnessing something rare, a love story written in silence. When the officiant signed, "You may kiss your bride," Ethan raised his hands one last time. "I love you." "I love you more," Grace signed back. And then he kissed her as the sun set over Puget Sound. 2 years later, the Thornton estate had transformed from a mausoleum into a home. Ethan taught at a school for deaf children, finally living the dream he had set aside when Claire died. Grace ran a foundation helping others navigate the journey from sound to silence. Harrison, now Grandpa Harrison, had learned that his greatest achievement was not his empire, but watching his daughter thrive. On a warm summer evening, Ethan found Grace in the nursery, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching the sunset. "She is kicking," Grace signed, placing his hand where life stirred beneath her skin. Ethan felt the tiny movements and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "That night in the hospital, when I thought silence meant the end of everything." She turned to face him, eyes bright. "I did not know it was just the beginning of a different language." She took his face in her hands. "Thank you for teaching me how to hear again." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Thank you for teaching me that showing up is sometimes all it takes." Their daughter kicked 3 times against his palm. In the language of their family, that meant only one thing. "I am here. I hear you. I love you." Sometimes the quietest moments hold the loudest truths. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life you might change simply by choosing to show up when everyone else has walked away.